What happens when a highly publicized three-day blitzkrieg drags into a grueling multi-year war of attrition? For the Kremlin, the answer is simple. If you cannot achieve a real military victory on the battlefield, you fake one. Throughout the war in Ukraine, Moscow has repeatedly relied on information operations, or IO, to mask severe tactical failures. But in the late spring of 2026, this strategy of smoke and mirrors led to one of the most disastrous tactical blunders for Russia's elite forces since the initial assault on Hostomel Airport. Deep within the contested Zaporizhia region, a specialized detachment of Russia's airborne forces, the VDV, attempted to execute a high-stakes covert infiltration. Their primary objective was not to hold a strategic front line, nor was it to break through Ukrainian fortifications. Their mission was purely political, to raise the Russian Federation flag over the settlement of Stepna, capture a few high-resolution photographs, and feed the insatiable Kremlin propaganda machine. Putin desperately needed a victory to showcase to the domestic audience and international skeptics. Instead, the Ukrainian military turned Russia's ultimate propaganda stunt into a lethal trap. What was supposed to be a celebrated victory for Moscow's finest ended up as a funeral procession. In this video, we analyze the tactical breakdown of the Stepna ambush, the sophisticated electronic and reconnaissance warfare deployed by Ukraine's HUR, and why Putin's regime is increasingly desperate to manufacture battlefield gains as global pressure mounts in 2026. To understand the weight of this operation, we must first look at the map. Stepna is not just another ruined settlement on the gray zone of the southern front. Located roughly 30 kilometers south of the critical logistics hub of Zaporizhia, Stepna represents a vital tactical stepping stone. For months, this sector has been a meat grinder. If Russian forces could establish a permanent fortified presence here, they would secure tactical overwatch on the E105 north-south highway. More importantly, holding Stepna would allow Russian heavy artillery and multiple launch rocket systems, or MLRS, to bring the outskirts of Zaporizhia city within firing range, complicating Ukrainian logistics across the Dnipro River. On May 18, 2026, Ukrainian security and defense forces, spearheaded by the HUR's elite Artan Special Forces unit, launched a lightning counteroffensive. They successfully purged Russian reconnaissance elements from Stepna, stabilizing the sector and restoring full Ukrainian control. To compound the embarrassment for Moscow, Ukraine's main Directorate of Intelligence released high-definition drone footage showing the systematic retreat and destruction of the Russian garrison. For Putin's high command, this was an unacceptable loss. With the summer campaigning season of 2026 underway, the Kremlin could not afford to admit that its lines in Zaporizhia were buckling. The order from Moscow was swift, uncompromising, and highly detached from operational reality. Re-enter Stepna, raise the flag, and change the narrative. Unlike the human wave tactics often seen utilizing convict units or poorly trained mobilized personnel, Russia committed its true elite for the Stepna operation. This mission was assigned to specialized reconnaissance and sabotage units from the VDV, Russia's airborne forces. These paratroopers are highly trained in deep infiltration, night operations, and asymmetrical warfare. The Kremlin's plan was meticulously engineered according to the Special Forces Manual. The operators chose a night with heavy rain and low visibility, calculating that the adverse weather would ground Ukraine's ubiquitous first-person view, or FPV, drones. Furthermore, every Russian operator was equipped with advanced anti-thermal camouflage suits designed to suppress body heat signatures and render them invisible to Ukrainian thermal imaging assets. They moved in absolute radio silence, slipping through the saturated fields, carrying specialized communication gear, and most importantly, the Russian flag. They believed they were ghosts, but they forgot who was watching. Unbeknownst to the VDV paratroopers, Ukraine's HUR, the military intelligence agency, had already compromised the Russian operational security. Through a combination of signals, intelligence, advanced electronic surveillance, and Western-supplied satellite reconnaissance, the HUR's Arten Special Forces Unit knew the exact vector timing and composition of the Russian infiltration team. The Ukrainians did not strike immediately. In military doctrine, an early engagement merely repels the enemy. To eliminate an elite force completely, you must allow them to compromise their own lines of retreat. The Arten operators patiently monitored the Russian advance, drawing them deeper into what military planners call a fire pocket, a pre-registered kill zone where every square meter is zeroed in by pre-positioned heavy weaponry mortars and crossfire positions. When the Russian units reached the designated center of Stepna, believing they were minutes away from their coveted photo op, the trap was sprung. According to official statements from HUR Commander Viktor Toko, the Ukrainian operators initially offered the surrounded Russian paratroopers an ultimatum: surrender, lay down your arms, and survive. In modern warfare, capturing elite personnel provides invaluable intelligence and a massive bargaining chip for prisoner exchanges. However, surrender is an increasingly rare option for Russian troops. In recent years, the Kremlin has draconianly tightened its military penal code, punishing voluntary surrender with up to 10 years in a penal colony. More powerful than the fear of the Gulag, however, was ideological indoctrination. These were elite volunteers deeply conditioned by state propaganda to believe in the myth of Russian military invincibility. The VDV operators refused the ultimatum and opened fire. What followed was a brutal close-quarters engagement. The combat footage released by the HUR paints a harrowing picture of modern urban warfare. Ukrainian forces utilized heavily armored vehicles and infantry fighting vehicles to seal the perimeter, absorbing RPG hits while maintaining sustained suppressive fire. The Arten unit then systematically divided into small, highly coordinated assault elements, supported by real-time overhead drone feeds that bypass the rain via advanced optical sensors. The Ukrainian Special Forces initiated a house-by-house clearing operation. Scouts identified Russian positions, while heavy assault teams systematically neutralized the VDV units piece by piece. The anti-thermal suits of the Russian soldiers proved useless once the close-quarters firefight erupted, illuminating the battlefield under muzzle flashes and explosives. By dawn, the entire Russian infiltration force was annihilated. The flags they carried to hoist for a Kremlin photo op were captured as battlefield trophies. to an outside military analyst, sending irreplaceable elite paratroopers on a high-risk mission just to raise a flag seems like tactical madness. Why waste scarce, highly trained special forces on a PR stunt? The answer lies deep within the psychology of Putin's regime, where perception dictates policy. A fascinating joint study conducted by the Ukrainian NGO Lingualexa and the Office of the Prosecutor General analyzed data from over 1,000 Russian prisoners of war. The findings were revealing. Russian personnel who consumed and endorsed state television propaganda were 6 times more likely to view the war as legitimate and twice as likely to express a desire to return to active combat despite suffering traumatic defeats. Propaganda is the lifeblood of the Russian military machine. It keeps the domestic population compliant, keeps the front lines moving, and fuels the ultra-nationalist ideology of the Russian world. But in 2026, maintaining this illusion has become an uphill battle for Vladimir Putin. The reality of the war is bleeding into the Russian mainland. In unprecedented televised statements, Putin himself has been forced to acknowledge the severe impact of Ukrainian long-range drone strikes on domestic critical infrastructure. Russian oil refineries are burning, energy grids are strained, and fuel shortages have begun to spike within the Russian Federation. When a dictator is forced to admit vulnerabilities on state television, he must immediately counteract it with stories of heroism and territorial conquest. That is why the flag over Stepna was so critical. It was meant to be a psychological counterweight, a direct message to the Russian public: yes, our refineries are burning, but look, we are capturing territory. Ukrainian defenses are failing. Instead, the operation yielded nothing but a digital archive of Russian casualties broadcasted globally by Ukrainian intelligence. The disaster at Stepna is not an isolated incident. It highlights a systemic recurring pathology within the Russian chain of command. Just weeks after the Stepna debacle, Russia's 38th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade attempted an identical operation in the nearby village of Nova. They too marched forward under strict orders to secure a flag-raising photograph. That unit was subsequently dismantled by a combination of Ukrainian drone swarms and coordinated infantry counterattacks, resulting in the capture of the very personnel assigned to hold the flag. We saw the same desperate pattern in late 2025 in Vovchansk and Kupiansk. In Kupiansk, the Russian High Command went as far as falsely announcing they had captured the entire city, only for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to personally visit the urban center, taking geolocated photographs to expose the Kremlin's fabrication to the international community. The timing of these desperate maneuvers is highly correlated with geopolitical maneuvering. The Kremlin continuously seeks leverage. Putin has repeatedly signaled a willingness to enter peace negotiations based on the outdated 2022 Istanbul frameworks. However, in international diplomacy, you only negotiate effectively from a position of strength. By launching these high-risk flag-raising operations, Moscow is desperately trying to engineer a false reality of territorial dominance to force Western allies into pressuring Kyiv into territorial concessions. But as the 2026 campaign progresses, Ukraine's tactical efficiency superior intelligence apparatus, and asymmetric warfare capabilities continue to shatter the Kremlin's illusions. From the deep isolation campaign, crippling Russian logistics in occupied Crimea, to the high-stakes fire pockets of Zaporizhia, Ukraine, is proving that battlefield reality will always triumph over state-sponsored fiction. Putin is running out of time, running out of elite personnel, and most importantly, running out of lies. Thank you for watching this operational analysis. If you want to stay informed on the cutting-edge tactical developments of the war in Ukraine, make sure to hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and leave your thoughts on the Stepna ambush in the comments below. See you in the next briefing.